Well, we're in this series that we'll dive into in just a moment called Into the Deep. But before we do that, I want to celebrate with you all the launch of our daughter, the birth of our daughter together. Last week, Creation Church on the east side of town was launched last week with over 300 people in attendance, and it was so great. Yeah, give it up. It's awesome. Great launch, great start. It's really cool. A lot of people actually that were kind of just sitting in here at this campus felt led to go to the new church and have gotten into leadership and ministry. Really cool to see that happening. So it's awesome. Great job. Keep praying for that church as they continue to minister in our community. Well, we're in this series called Into the Deep, where we've been looking at the deepest longings of our soul. And actually, today is the conclusion of that series, but really a conclusion of a year-long focus that we've had on the soul, that God actually wants us to flourish and have a flourishing life. And if we don't talk about the needs of our soul and how they can be met by the power of God, then we're kind of missing a huge part of who we are. And so I want to wrap up the series, not just this last three-part series, but also the entire year series on our soul by talking about one of the deepest longings of our soul. 2 weeks ago, Pastor Bo talked about freedom as one of the longings of our soul. Last week, I talked about blessing, and today I want to talk about satisfaction. Say satisfaction. Yeah, our souls, John Ortberg writes in his book, Soul Keeping, our souls are always craving, never satisfied. There's this craving inside our souls. Matter of fact, interestingly enough, the Hebrew culture, they made a word for soul that actually means thriving, striving, desiring. Not thriving, longing or desiring. That's the word, nephesh. It's the Hebrew word nephesh, and it means longing. But that's the word they use for soul. The soul, in its very nature, longs. It desires. And so often we experience less than the fulfillment of what our soul desires. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, the Bible uses, when it describes the soul, it often uses phrases like being hungry or thirsty or hollow or empty, typically not satisfied, because that's where most of us live. It's always been my default to try to find my satisfaction in what I do, in my work. And so throughout my life, I've always had this tension of not putting too much emphasis on my work to provide me fulfillment in life. And so I've kind of, throughout my life, I've just leaned in that direction. So I remember when I came back from the mission field. So I was on the mission field in Croatia for a few years with my family. And we came back and we landed in Los Angeles. In LA, Echo Park, LA is where I worked. It was the headquarters for our denomination. We're part of the Foursquare denomination, and that's where their headquarters office is. And if you want to be somebody in Foursquare, you got to go through LA. You know what I'm saying? That's how it was. So I felt pretty good about myself, that they asked me to come and work in LA, and I had a significant role in our missions department. I traveled all over the United States and made more money than I ever had. They paid pretty well. And my family lived in Anaheim. I lived with them, but we lived in Anaheim. And we found a house there, and we loved Anaheim. My family loved it. I mean, we had season passes to Disneyland. We were near the beaches. We had a great church. They were so happy. Here's the problem. I worked in Echo Park. Anybody know the area? If you know the area, it's not Echo Park, it's the drive between Anaheim and Echo Park. So I was on the 5 freeway 2 hours every morning and 2 hours every afternoon. It was awesome. After a year, my soul was dead. I had made a 5-year commitment to this job. And my soul was, I would come home angry, frustrated. I understood road rage at that point in my life. I was like, God, why did you bring me here? And he was like, well, you did it, Anyway, we had that argument. And I love what Drew Carey says. Drew Carey says this: you hate your job? There's a support group for that. It's called Everybody. They meet at the bar. Anyway, the great theologian Drew Carey. Anyway, the reality is the main thing we bring home from work isn't a paycheck. It's our souls. And I'm going to use the example of work quite often today, but it's not just work that we try to find fulfillment in. It's everything else too. That we try to find ultimate satisfaction in our relationships, in our friendships, in our marriage. And all of those things are wonderful. They provide some sense of fulfillment in our lives. But what I'm talking about is ultimate fulfillment and satisfaction. Because at some point, the people that you love leave you. I'm not talking about divorce or something. I'm just talking about they die. It's like they're not there anymore, and you're left disappointed. The job that you got that you thought was going to be the job, like I thought in LA, disappoints you. There's the finances, the vocation, whatever it might be, leaves you kind of wanting, right? And that's the world we live in. It's never enough. There's always something more. We're always striving. We're just like, it's not fulfilling to me. The things that I have and the things that I do and the people that I'm with, there's something missing. And all of it points to a couple of things. One is that the soul needs satisfaction. We've talked a lot about that over this past year. The soul needs satisfaction. The soul longs for so many things. And today, I want to talk about something that we've touched on in every message. It's never been the primary point, though, of each message. And today, I want it to be the primary point. I want us to talk about how our soul's deepest longings can only be satisfied. How it can only be satisfied. And this is it. And if you're taking notes, write this down. The soul needs satisfaction, absolutely. And here's it. And it can only truly and fully be satisfied in God. We were created for relationship with our Creator, with the one who made us. So at the end of the day, the one who created our souls, we can't truly be ultimately, fully, and in a lasting way satisfied unless we find him. I love Psalm 63. If you have a Bible, go ahead and turn there. In Psalm 63, we're going to kind of look at the longing of David. David longed for this relationship with God. But in the context of when he wrote this Psalm 63, super interesting. He had been kicked out of his own kingdom. So by this time, he is the king of Israel, and his son Absalom decides that he wants to be king, and he doesn't see the pathway for his own life, to his own satisfaction, right? And so he decides to take it, and at the threat of David's life, David flees, and he ends up in the wilderness. Now, he'd been in the wilderness before on more than one occasion, matter of fact. Early on, he was in the wilderness because he had to flee Saul when Saul was the king. He had to flee for his life. So David understands wilderness living, and where there's a lack, and he probably wishes that he had more, and he did have more. I mean, when he was the king, he had everything he would want. Everything. It was at his beck and call. He could find satisfaction in all of the stuff that we try to find satisfaction in, but he ends up in the wilderness, and it's in this place of wandering and of lack that he writes these powerful, powerful words. Let's read. Oh God, oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. Some of your translations might say early in the morning I seek you. The reason that is because it's the same Hebrew word for early and earnestly. They use it for the same thing. If you rise up early in the morning, you're seeking something. You're earnestly seeking something. So that's the idea that you earnestly, early in the morning, I seek you. I look for you. I'm trying to find you, God, because my soul thirsts for you. My soul, I realize that my soul, when I had everything, I still was unsatisfied ultimately. And so I realized that my soul thirsts for you, God. My flesh faints for you as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I've looked upon you. I'm trying to find you, God, because I think that's where my soul can truly be satisfied, in the sanctuary, beholding your power and your glory. Because of your steadfast love, because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. He's saying, I've learned, God, that your love is better than, it satisfies more than anything else in this life. Your love does. And this is before Jesus, his death and resurrection, right? I mean, we have like God's love for us in the flesh, in the person of Jesus, displayed for us. This was before that, and he had this revelation of God's love, that he's like, your love is better than anything else in this life that I try to satisfy my life with. And so my lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul will be satisfied. Say satisfied. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food, and my mouth will praise you with joyful lips. He's saying, just as my body is satisfied with great food, my soul is satisfied as I praise you, as I lift your name up, as I connect with you, when I remember you upon my bed. So he starts early in the morning, right? Reflecting on who he's seeking God, he's pursuing God, and then in the evening he reflects, right, on how his soul is satisfied by the presence of God, and I meditate on you in the watches of the night, for you have been my help. You are the one who satisfies, and in the shadow of your wings I will sing for joy. So my soul clings to you. Your right hand upholds me. See, David realized that at the end of the day, even the end of his life, the only thing that could truly satisfy him, the longings of his soul, was the presence of God. And so, whether he was wandering in the wilderness or sleeping in a king's palace, he would seek after God. He would long for him, thirst for him, faint for him, as if he was living in a dry and weary land. So what is our response, right? What do we long for, and do we think God is part of that fulfillment of the longings that we have, right? I remember being so lost in Los Angeles. I was so angry. I was like, God, why? I mean, did I tell you that my family was the happiest they'd ever been? It was really frustrating for me. I mean, they loved Anaheim, Disneyland. I mean, we had some resources that we never had before. We went to a great church. I mean, all of these wonderful things. My family was so happy, and my soul was disintegrating. And so I remember about a year into this job, I'm weary, and so I'm driving home one day, and I just began to pray and worship. Before that, I would drive home, but I would still be working. I'd be making phone calls. I'd be, back in the day when texting was still allowed while you were driving. Don't do that anymore, please. Like seriously, but it was just, I was just always busy doing, and then a year into it, nothing was fulfilling, right? This job wasn't fulfilling. Driving from Echo Park to Anaheim wasn't fulfilling, and so I decided to pray in that 2 and a half drive, and I started to worship, and I started to play Christian music in my car. I just started to focus in on God, and I remember, praying almost every day on my way home from work, asking God to deliver me from purgatory, because that's how I felt. If you're from Los Angeles, I'm so sorry, but that's just how I felt in that time of my life, right? So several months of this, where I came home. When I got home, and I'm seriously, you can ask my wife, when I got home and I changed this, I had this, instead of coming home angry and frustrated because of the drive and because of the pressures of the work and all of that I was doing, I came home relaxed and at peace, refreshed to spend time with my kids. And the last year of being in Anaheim was amazing for us and for our family and for me. But the catalyst wasn't that my job changed, or that we moved closer to my work, or nothing changed except my attitude about what I was doing inside a car for an hour and a half, 2 hours every day, because I just chose to focus on God and seek Him. And so this was for several months, and I'm just praying, God, deliver me, but not your will. Not my will, but your will, that kind of a prayer. Have you ever prayed a prayer like that? God, I want to find my satisfaction in you and your purposes for my life, not my plan, and all that. And so I'm praying this prayer. And out of the blue, literally out of the blue, I get a phone call. I look at on my way home, and I remember exactly where I was on the 5 freeway. If you're familiar with Southern Cal, so I'm on the 5 freeway going south out of LA, and I'm right next to the Citadel. It's an outlet mall on the left-hand side if you're driving south on the 5. And so I remember exactly where I was because I sit there a lot. That was one of the places that you sat a long time waiting for traffic. And so I was sitting there, and I got this phone call, and I didn't get a lot of phone calls on my drive home. So I didn't answer them. So that's probably why people stopped calling. But anyway, I looked at it. It was Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson is the former pastor of this church. And he was the pastor of this church when he called me. And so I was like, so I took it. He's an old friend, mentor in my life for decades, actually. And so I took the phone call. I was a little surprised. We hadn't talked in a while. And I said, hi, Pastor Ken. And he said, hey, Steve. And Pastor Ken usually gets right to the point. And so he said, hey, the leadership team here and I have been praying about seeing if you and Suzanne would pray about coming back to Bend. Just like, you guys, I didn't say this, but I'm like, I don't need to pray about that one. Done, sealed, and delivered. When do you want me there? That's what I wanted to say. Instead, I played it cool. I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, it's pretty good in LA. I lied. And he said, all right, well, just pray about it and let me know. And so I went home, and Suzanne and I prayed, and literally, though I felt like it was God's answer to the searching and the longing that I had. But then I got here, and I realized that location doesn't change anything, I mean, this is a wonderful place to live, don't get me wrong. It's been a great place to raise my kids and for them to go through school and have long-lasting friendships. And I couldn't think of a better place to raise a family. So I'm so grateful for that. But it doesn't ultimately satisfy, right? Because we all know people who came here and they thought that this place was going to satisfy, and they hit a wall, and maybe they lost a job or family crisis or whatever, and it's not that for them. It's not the place of fulfillment, right? So we know that location. So there's more, right? There's more that our soul needs. And the basis of this message is that our soul needs satisfaction, and it can only truly and fully be satisfied in God. David, in his moment of despair, he chose to seek God. I spent several months in a car just seeking God, asking him for his presence. See, I love the imagery that David uses. My soul clings to you. It's the imagery of a baby clinging to his or her mom. The dependency. Without you, there really is no fulfillment, right? A baby can't survive on its own. And we try so hard. We work so hard to try to be satisfied and fulfilled, and we do what we need to do, and we work really hard, but often at the expense of searching after God, who is the ultimate fulfiller of our needs that our soul has. I remember the moment where I decided that I would not let go of God, that I would cling on to him like a baby with a mom. After my son died, I decided that I'm not going to let go of you, God. No matter what happens in my life, I am not letting go of you. David moves from just looking and seeking and hungering for God to worshiping God. And he realizes that as food satisfies the body, worship satisfies the soul, and in the presence of God satisfies my soul. And I want to come back to that in just a moment. I want to come back to that idea of worship as we take communion together at the end of our service today. But before we do that, I thought, Jesus, do you have anything to say to us about how you satisfy the soul? What's the pathway of soul satisfaction based on your teaching, Jesus? That's what I asked. And so he led me to Matthew chapter 16. You can turn there if you're following along in your Bibles. You can turn there. Matthew 16, Jesus teaches about soul satisfaction. He's really talking about the soul. And I've got to tell you, when I read it, I was like, no, Jesus, this isn't what I want to teach on Sunday. This isn't happy. This is sad type of stuff. This is like hard stuff. I want the easy way for soul satisfaction. I want you just to satisfy my soul. I don't want to work for it. I want to try. I just want it to happen. I don't want to do anything. I just want it to be. And Jesus was like, oh, okay, well, do what you want, Steve. Let me know how that's going for you, that kind of thing. And so he led me to Matthew 16, and this is what he teaches on, and it's really hard. And if anyone would come after me, he writes, he says, if anyone wants to search after me, if anybody longs for me, if anybody thirsts for me, if anybody wants to follow me, let him or her deny himself. Whoa, no. I'm trying to fulfill myself. And Jesus, you're telling me to deny myself as the pathway for fulfilling myself. Deny yourself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life or pursue fulfillment in this life will actually lose their life. But whoever loses his life, whoever, for my sake, whoever pursues me, whoever thirsts for me, whoever searches out for me, they will find their life. That's what he's saying. saying, if you pursue me, you will find life. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world? So you get everything that you think will fulfill your life in this world, but you forfeit your soul in the process. Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? What would you be willing to sacrifice, to deny yourself, to find fulfillment? I got to tell you, this is counterintuitive. It's upstream to our culture. It doesn't make any earthly sense. It goes against our flesh and our desires and what we think we want to have a flourishing and a flourishing soul and a flourishing life means to deny ourselves. And I'm just like, Jesus, this is a hard word. And I was kind of studying this in John Ortberg's book that we've used throughout this year for the series that we've done. John calls it strategic disappointment, where we deliberately withhold things in our lives to help us learn that we are not slaves to those things, that those things actually don't have control over us, that those things we're saying by like strategically withholding things, we're saying, I don't find fulfillment in those things. I'm not saying that they're bad, but I'm saying that ultimately they won't fulfill me. So I'm going to withhold some things. Now, it's interesting to me because I've never heard of that. I've never heard of people like this. It's said this way because most of my life is I learned this by the stuff that's taken from me without my choice. And I find myself disappointed. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what I think. But he's actually saying be intentional about creating disappointment in your life. I'm like, so I kept on studying this, right? I kept on researching this, and I found a scientific study. It was really interesting. I wasn't sure I liked it because it was with a group of monkeys, and I'm not sure how I feel about all that stuff. Anyway, go beyond that. It was a study that was done on a group of monkeys who, one part of the group received what the researchers called mild stress, strategically inputted into their lives. I don't know what that means. I didn't want to know, so I didn't research it further, but they received some kind of mild stress when they were in infancy and adolescence. Okay? The other group of test subjects did not receive. They had a stress-free growing up, happy and everything's great and life's going to be good for them. That kind of growing up, right? And so they compared these two groups of monkeys, and the group that actually received some mild stress early on were better able to handle stress later, larger stressful situations, than the group that had not received, that had a stress-free life. That was interesting to me, and then I kept reading it, and they said that not only those monkeys, not only that, but these monkeys who received the points of stress were also more curious, more explorative, and more resilient. I started thinking about this thing about disappointment and strategic disappointments, like deliberately withholding things in your life. I started thinking about my parenting. I started thinking about how I was parented. I started thinking about my life, just in general, in our culture. And I was talking with the speaking team about all of this, and someone immediately said, "Well, that sounds like trust fund babies, that are protected early on in their lives from all the chaos and craziness, and they kind of have the road is kind of well built for them already, and they're going to be just fine." Or the tendency that I have in my parenting, maybe some of you have, to protect my kids from any kind of suffering, or disappointment or sacrifice. I remember when my kids were, playing sports, and they'd have a conflict with a coach, and they'd come running to me and mommy, and I remember like wanting to go to, Suzanne more than me, but wanting to go to the coach and like give her a piece of her mind, like, what are you treating my kid this way for, and that kind of a thing, instead of letting our kids kind of live in that tension and figuring it out, for themselves. Anyway, just stuff like this, it caused me to kind of start to think about how safe I try to make it for my kids, and how I want to like give them the most opportunities in their life, and I want to make it all easy for them. But in making it easy for them, I might actually be hurting them later in life because they don't know how to navigate disappointments. Interesting. Anyway, I was thinking about this with my own childhood, and this is not a parenting message at all, but I was thinking about how my parents raised me, and my dad had no problem saying no to me. He was really good at it, actually. He said it all the time. I remember my dad working 2 jobs for 12 years of my life, and I rarely saw him because one job ended at 2 in the morning, and he slept through when I was going off to school, and then he was at work when I got home from school, and that for 12 years. I remember that, and I remember not having everything my friends had. I remember having chores and responsibilities and not getting paid for that. It's called an allowance. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Yeah, there's such a thing. And my dad would say, you're part of this family, so you got stuff you got to do. And I remember all of this, and I know I had such a hard life, I know. Resilience. It built some kind of resilience in me, I think. I remember Pastor Bo, and this, as I was talking with the team about this, she said that when her parents didn't allow her to do things that her friends did, like going to dances and doing things like that. Her dad, and she would kind of make a stink about it, her dad would say, it makes you strong to stand against the wind, doesn't it? She hated that. I mean, can you imagine? High schooler, makes you stand strong against the wind, whatever. I don't even know what that means. Anyway, I'm putting words, I don't think she did that. That's what I would have done. But it's interesting, isn't it? Evan told me he wasn't allowed to sleep with blankets as a child, but he lets his kids have blankets now, so there you go. I don't think that's true, by the way. Anyway, it was pretty funny in the moment. But yeah, I don't know. So this idea of strategic disappointments, this is the point, and that's just something for you to think about. But this is what I really want to say about that. Disappointments don't have to be debilitating. They actually can be a catalyst for connection. Whether they're strategic disappointments where you intentionally withhold things from your life, or whether they happen to you, they still, both kinds, can be a catalyst for connection. Whether you're forced into the wilderness by a son who's rebelled and you don't know what to do, or whether you decide, I'm just not going to watch as much Netflix as I usually do. Whatever, strategic disappointment versus disappointments that happen, we still have to deal with them, and the soul needs satisfaction. And it can only truly and fully be satisfied in God. So when you find yourself in those places of disappointment, maybe some of you are there today, and maybe the words of Psalm 63 would encourage your soul to search early in the morning. I seek you, my soul thirsts for you. I look for you, God. I want to experience your presence. My soul will be satisfied in you. I want to invite the team come on back up, and we're going to move into a time of communion, and I'm convinced that the way to navigate the disappointments in our lives successfully and ultimately find satisfaction in this life is through worship. Why worship? Because I believe it is the way in which, it's the avenue in which we earnestly seek God. It's one of the ways that we can be found in his presence. And worship is simply an adoration. It's saying, God, I praise you and I look to you. I don't look to my circumstances. I look to you, and I want to thirst after your presence in my life. And worship does that for us. It helps us refocus our attention, like I did on the drive home from Los Angeles. It's just worship re-centers us and says, and it's like, God, you are most important in my life. And I love what Jesus says in Matthew 6, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. All the other things that we believe we need are for fulfillment. Jesus is saying, listen, it's not a zero-sum game. It's not like if you seek me and if you deny yourself things that's just your lot in life and you won't ever have anything. He's not saying that. He's actually saying, but if you seek all the stuff in this life to find a fulfillment, you're actually going to lose it because it won't fulfill you. You might get it, but then you realize it doesn't do what I thought it was supposed to do. But if you seek first the presence of God, his goodness and his kindness and his faithfulness, if you get up early in the morning and just take 5-10 minutes and say, God, I center myself and I hunger and I thirst for you. God, I can't find sustenance and life without you. And so at the very beginning of my day, God, I give it to you, and you're the center of my life. I declare that. I want to help me be mindful of you throughout the day. And when I get busy and I'm trying to fulfill other things in my life, Lord, you are at the center. And then when I go to bed at night, I'm reminding myself of how you, God, you've been faithful today, and how I saw your hand in this conversation, and I reflect on the goodness of God. At the end of the day, you see what happening. All of a sudden, you find fulfillment and satisfaction in Him. And then this is the amazing thing. He works from that place, and He begins to give you amazing relationships, people of grace and kindness in your life. He begins to shower you with provision, and maybe you don't get everything you ever wanted, but you always have what you need. You have food on the table and a roof over your head, and God comes alongside, and He gives you peace and comfort. Man, you've been searching and striving for peace and comfort, and you can't find it outside of relationship with God. He's the center. He's the source. Sometimes I think all of the longings that we have, that our soul has, is ultimately pointed towards Him. The longing that until we wake up and seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things will be added to you.